Here, Chris, I'll let you lead out.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Greetings from Salt Lake City, Utah. It's so good to be with you today. Just a warm welcome to all of our wonderful ASEA leaders, and another big congratulations for your qualifications, for obviously for Ascent and for the training. As we know, and we've said many, many times, it's very unfortunate that we couldn't be together face to face. But we want to do the best we can to take advantage of technology. And with that, we're obviously excited to connect you with Tyler Norton today, our founder, and who has some extremely valuable training for everyone. And so with that being said, in just a minute, guys, I will turn it over to Tyler Norton. But just briefly, I'm Chris Maston, and I'm Senior Director of Global Field Relations at ASEA, and just excited to be with everyone this morning. So, and just a quick message, we are recording this in English. And so in 24 hours, this will be available in your virtual office library in English. And then we will be following that up with an email as to when a translation will be available and posted in your back office. So we will be translating into Spanish, as well as French, traditional Chinese, and obviously, and then followed up by Hungarian. So we will send an email with that, letting you know when those subtitles will be posted. And that will also be posted in the new peak performance training in your back office. So, and if you obviously anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact us and let us know. So with that being said, I'd like to turn the time over to Tyler Norton, our founder, and so he can share a few words. And again, thank you for your time.
Chris, thanks. Good to be with you. Can you hear me okay? Chris, give me a thumbs up if you've got audio okay. All right, great. Well, I'm scrolling through this list of panel or attendees here, and it's some beautiful names in here. And I'm pretty certain that you can't turn on your videos, or I'd make you all turn your videos on so I could see your smiling faces today. I was looking at the list of qualifiers, and this is the 2020 and the 2021, the Ascent qualifiers from 2 years. And I'm just amazed at the fact that we haven't been able to get together for so long. As Chris said, boy, we wish we were face to face. And frankly, we wish we were in Rome or Croatia or Bali or all the locations that we were hoping to go to. I'm turning on the chat now so I can see some of your messages. Good to see all of you guys sharing thoughts and saying hello to each other. So it's great to be with you. Wonderful to know that we hope that some things are improving in some areas of the world. That my heart's been broken seeing what's happening in India and other places, and we're mindful of all of you, and certainly hope and pray that you're healthy and safe and your families are doing okay, and that you're being careful, and hope that we can be aggressive in sharing what we have with the world at this critical time. I think we've got an opportunity to do something very special in helping. Some of you may remember that I bumped into this app, I've got it here on my phone, by a company out of San Francisco called SY Partners. And it was called Superpowers. Do you guys remember me talking to you about superpowers? You go in and you take a test, and it basically walks you through some of the superpower options. Creative thinking, or a complexity buster. Cultural compass is one. Decisiveness is another. Evangelizing is a competency or superpower. Energy, etc. I was interested when I did this test. I found out that my superpower was I am a pattern mapper, which at first pass I was like, well, what does that mean? Here's what it says on this app about pattern mappers, and I want to talk today about a little bit of a pattern. Pattern mappers look at the world as if it had a secret overlay showing all the connections between and among things. So they're always in a mode of inquiry. They're always asking questions and looking to map similarities, and they're chasing after the logic. and they tend to help teams find shortcuts at the start of a new endeavor by deducing what's new and maybe what's familiar. And there's a part in here, it says, pattern mappers will keep noodling and looking and asking for questions to try to find the unique connections between things. And as I read this the first time, I thought, that's kind of true. I do like to see the connections between things that might help us navigate life a little bit better, success a little bit better, and put ourselves in a position to maybe, as you know, I like "you are here" maps. I like to be able to look at something and say, of all these swirling confluence of things, where are we in the grand scheme of things today? And I have come across a Japanese concept I want to share with you guys that I think is a brilliant pattern. Now, some of you may recognize this. Let me give you a little background on it. It's called IKIGAI, and that's a Japanese word. Ikigai stems from the area of Okinawa. If you know anything about Okinawa, Japan, you may know that it has the highest per capita amount or population of centenarians, of people that have made it to 100 years old. And I think there's a connection between this concept that I'm going to share with you that's born from this Okinawa area. It's called Ikigai, not Ikigai, but Ikigai. And it's a beautiful concept, and I'm very, very anxious to share it today. I spent a lot of time researching it in preparation for this training. Couple more concepts, and then I'll dive into it. If you think about the process of trying to really get to clarity about what it is you're trying to do in your life, where you want to spend your time and energy, I think this is a great "you are here" map for us to look at. So let me share my screen, and I'll show you. By the way, someone just asked in the how do you write Ikigai? I'll show you exactly how it's spelled here right now. So good question, Sylvie. Thank you. Let me share my screen, and bear with me, guys. Let's see if I'm in the right spot. Okay, I'm thinking you can see that. So I'm going to launch my... Chris, do you mind coming off mute and just telling me if you're okay seeing that? I just want to make sure you can see it. Oh.
I can see it.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. Thanks. Okay, great. So let me walk you through this. So here's Ikigai. Here's how you would spell it. And if you were to break this word apart in Japanese, the first part of Iki means life. I should have talked to Ben Tyler, our chief legal counsel, who's fluent in Japanese, and talked to him. But in my research, Iki is life, and Gai is worth. So the combination of those two is a concept of where is a life's worth. Other definitions of Ikigai are, the purpose in life, and something one can live for. So this is a really interesting, not unlike the way we might refer to it in the US or even across Europe as the mission that someone lives. But I love the way the Japanese have organized this intersection and this confluence of Ikigai. And I think it's a beautiful concept for you to consider today. I want to challenge you guys to give some thought to this as you think about your journey at ASEA and your journey in life. So let's talk about what is Ikigai, okay? As I mentioned a minute ago, it's a concept that means your reason for being, and it lives at the confluence or the intersection of four things, okay? So number one, what you love. This concept and meaning for reason for life, or life's worth, or life's purpose begins with, can you identify and clearly understand what you love? Then, what are you good at? So what you are good at is now intersecting with something that you love. The third dimension it adds is, what does the world or your community need, which I think is a beautiful reference to responsibility that we all have. What does the world need? And then the last dimension of this, which I think is super practical and important, is what can you be rewarded for? And so in Okinawa, Japan, this notion of Ikigai is what they would say is the living embodiment of the intersection or the confluence of what you love intersecting with something you're really good at that also has a social relevance, a community relevance, a world relevance. In other words, the world needs something. And it's also something you can be remunerated for or rewarded for. Just stare at that for a minute. And if I was in a group setting, I probably would have started and asked all of you to stand and stay standing until such time that you couldn't answer in the affirmative. And I would have said, stay standing if you do on a daily basis what you love. And if you were good at it, and if it was something the world needed and you could be rewarded for it. Now, I'll get into this further in just a minute. There's several intersections here, and the center is Ikigai. So the center is this concept of life's worth, and it's where the intersection of these four things live. What about some of these other intersections? And in this concept or philosophy, there's some interesting interplays. Let me walk you through those. So for example, if I took the intersection of what you love with what you're good at, in this concept, that is where passion would arise. But on the opposite side of what you love, intersecting with what the world needs, you see mission, which I think is a very interesting play. On the left side is this notion of what I love and what I'm good at, I'm passionate about. I'll give you an example. I love to play the guitar. I love it. And I'm reasonably good at it. I'm passionate about it. But as much as I'd like to hope the world needs it from me, it's not my mission in life, right? I don't know that my approach to music does much more for anyone else than for me. And that's not trying to be self-effacing or taking away from that hobby or avocation. It is saying that there's something when what you love can intersect with what the world needs, it creates a different sense of compelling motivation that starts to feel less like a passion and more like a mission. And of course, the perfect world where you can see where Ikigai lives is where your passion and your mission are also part of what you do every day. So notice that relationship between passion and mission. What about that little section in the center, the green section where it intersects with something you're good at, what you love, and what the world needs? And it describes this little mini intersection as, yeah, you're delighted to be there. There is a fullness there, but you may not be generating enough income to support and bless your family and the people you love and care for. And so there's a missing element to the true Ikigai because it does not intersect with something that ultimately you can be rewarded for, that gives you the ability to sustain life and bless the lives you love. Really powerful, I think, just looking at what I've already done here for us to stare at this for a minute. Let's keep filling it in. So you notice there's an intersection between what you're good at and what you can be rewarded for. And that's what they would refer to as profession. This is something you realize you have a natural proclivity or ability in, and you can be paid for it. It may not be something you love, and it may or may not entirely intersect with what the world in general needs, but it's profession, and I'm willing to be rewarded for it. I'm good at it, and so I might live in that profession intersection. Similarly, on the other side, something the world needs and I can be rewarded for it, the purple area might be a vocation. Similar to profession, to be sure, right? Professions and vocations have great similarities, but maybe one is a little bit more aligned with what I'm really good at. The other might just be trading energy and effort for a need the world has, and I can be paid for it. Notice the small section on the bottom where the three meet, where what you're good at, what you can be rewarded for, and the world needs is, this is interesting because there they would characterize, you're comfortable here, but there's just not this fulfillment, not this filling sense of completeness that if I could just intersect with what I love, that would take me to this place of IKIGAI at the intersection. Okay, now there's a couple other spots that we haven't filled in here that are worth discussing. One is the section where you have what you love, what you're good at, and what you can be rewarded for intersecting, but it doesn't quite connect with a social or larger body of need. And here is where they say that there's a sense of satisfaction. You're doing something you're good at, you're doing something you love, right? And you're being rewarded for it, but maybe you're not feeling as useful to the needs of this world. And so you can kind of find yourself outside of IKIGAI because it's not really meeting a broader need of the social construct or your community that's around you. And then this next dimension is also interesting here. And it says here, you're involved in what you love. It is something the world needs, right? And something you're rewarded for, but it lacks a little bit of that excitement. There's an element of complacency and even a little uncertainty because you're not sure if you're really good at it. Yeah, you're being compensated for it, but it's not quite IKIGAI. Now stare at this with me for just a minute and give some thought to what you see here on the screen. What would our life be like if we could, in fact, find IKIGAI, where we could intersect our lives by doing and being engaged in something we love, something we're very good at, something the world desperately needs, and something we can actually be rewarded for? And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful question to consider as we think about the journey we're on in life. And as I stared at this, I started to think in terms of, okay, you know, do people really live their IKIGAI? I mean, I started to ask this question, you know, have you found it? Are you living this notion of, I do what I love, I'm good at it, I can be rewarded for it, and I'm meeting a need that's around me in this world? I think it's a fair question that we should all ask. Here's a question for you. Throw in the chat what you think on this one. Do you think most people are living their IKIGAI? What do you guys think? Do you think there are people that are truly living this out? So far, the majority are saying no to me. In fact, almost all of you are saying no. Most people are not, 99.9 are not living their IKIGAI, very few. I agree with that. And it is sad. Ellen just said, sadly, no, like there's just not. And that's a good point that Sharona said. Most are waiting for a retirement. They're waiting for some destinational arrival, and then they'll start doing what they love, right? And I think this question of why not? Why aren't people living out this clear reason for being? This clear sense of I do what I love, I do something I'm good at, it has a place in the world, it serves a purpose in this world, and in fact, I can be rewarded for it. And I think it's interesting that, and we're going to talk about this as we move forward with the time we have today, this notion of what we have for people, what we have to offer is, I think, something we ought to be discussing in terms of IKIGAI. Okay, so read this quote with me for a minute. This was Victor Lebeau. He was an economist and was speaking to the government, the US government in this case, about the economy, and said, our enormously productive economy demands of us that we make consumption our way of life. We end up converting the buying and the use of goods into these almost spiritual rituals. We seek spiritual satisfaction, ego satisfaction in consumption. And we need things consumed or burned up and replaced and discarded at an ever accelerating rate. Now, this was written in an era that I still felt, as we all look back, 70 years ago and say, we weren't anywhere near the consumerism then that we are today. But I think Dr. LeBeau here could see into the future of what we were starting to create in this world. And we were starting to create a world that would place a high value and priority on consumption. What was the effect? What has the effect of this been on the world around us? Well, I think what's happened is that the approach to IKIGAI has kind of pivoted to something that looks just like this. So this notion of what can you be rewarded for, or let me pivot and say, what can you be paid for? And it's almost like what you love, what you may be naturally or inherently talented in, or where the social need of the world may well be, is less important. And I think that's become a notion that is unfortunately starving out where people can find Ikigai. Unfortunately, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine that I know well, his daughter, and he's very, very smart and has run and sold several companies and is a very intelligent person, had a daughter that got married to someone who wanted to devote his life to the arts. And the parents of the bride were so concerned because they couldn't see how this would provide for their daughter. And they ended up steering this new son-in-law into an area of education that was not his original intent. And I remember hearing this, and I'm trying not to be judgmental and saying, oh, that's a mistake, right? It's a mistake. We all need to be able to explore this notion of Ikigai. And I think the reason consumerism controls so much of the world is because we've given away these other dimensions in this confluence in this model. So think about it this way. Maybe I just end up starting in the blue and realize that the world needs a certain thing and they'll pay me for it. And so I begin to live this relationship. And by the way, guys, how many of the people we talk to on a daily basis are living in the intersection of these two circles? I do something the world needs and I can be paid for it. And I think we would all agree a huge percentage of the world and the labor force, regardless of what country you're from or what economy you live in, are just doing the best they can to be rewarded or paid for something and trying to provide something the world would deem as of value enough to be paid. But is this enough? Am I just supposed to accept the intersection of these two things, deploy myself in a vocation that's honorable? Or is there room in this world? Is there room for me to consider something more? I mean, we all have heard the difference in definitions. A job is a paid position, right? This is a position of regular employment. That's what comes to mind here as I look at this. This is a job. But work, my life's work, may not necessarily line up beautifully with my job. If work is activity that requires mental or physical or even personal development, that's effort that's done in order to achieve an outcome or a purpose, then this feels different to me than just the job. And I'm sad in my heart when I think how many of the people we know around us may be settling for less than Ikigai, less than a meaningful, purposeful life that's truly worth living, because the demands of their world require them to stay highly focused on just delivering a job, regular gainful employment that trades time for money. Now, what about the other side, right? If you said, okay, maybe I start out by saying, how can I get paid? And I think that's very noble to want to be paid and in service of people you love and maybe your family and what you're good at. And yet what's interesting, literally right through the window here, not more than 100 yards from my office where I'm sitting, is the office of a dentist that is my neighbor. I should say used to be my neighbor. For 12 years, we lived very close to each other, know him very well. He'd come over and hang out with me, good friends. Here's a person who devoted a great deal of time developing himself professionally as a dentist. What's interesting is, on my most recent visit to his office, which bears his name, it's a partnership with his brother. They're both have the same last name. And I went in only to find out that my good friend, I'll say his name is John, was no longer working at the dentist office, right, that bears his name. And I remember saying, well, where is he? And they said, you know, he really was struggling. Clearly, he was being paid well. He was being rewarded for what he did. He had a profession and he was good at it. I mean, I wouldn't keep going to him if he wasn't good at it. But I think he started to question IKIGAI. He didn't maybe know the concept of IKIGAI out of Okinawa, but I think he started to question, you know, is this really something I love? And sure enough, he walked out, sold his part to his brother. I don't know, to be honest, I owe him a text message exactly what he's doing now. But I have this hope in my heart that he's out here really looking for what would be this Ikigai concept and reason for being. It's when what you love can intersect with what you're good at, something the world needs, and something you can be rewarded for, which is in and of itself not inherently wrong, that you can arrive at Ikigai. And I'm fascinated with this. And I'd like to, I wish so desperately I could invite you guys to interact with me a little bit more in this training. If we were in a room together, I'd ask you to take some time and write down your thoughts on these different areas. In fact, as I was going through this, I said to myself, okay, so here's a question I would like to pose, and maybe you guys can respond in the chat. Could ASEA be a representation of Ikigai? What do you think? Is it possible that what we have here at ASEA is in fact something the world needs, right? Something we can be rewarded for, something we can all get good at, and something we can love? Yeah, so your answers, yes, absolutely. Yes, with all a bunch of S's. It checks these boxes, is what someone just said. So I think it's a really interesting challenge for all of us to consider what this is. And I will submit to you that there are people in the world that are really trying to find out what it is. Why am I a dentist? And I don't want to do this anymore, right? What is it about what I've chosen to invest all of my energy in? Was it simply something that I knew I could be rewarded for and I was reasonably good at? So let's break this down for a minute. I'd like to kind of challenge all of you in this exercise now to find your Ikigai, and send it to me in the chat for a minute. So let's start dimensionalizing this. I'm going to go back. List out in the chat things you love, and it can be of any nature, and I'll call some of these things out in the chat. What are the things that you love? As you said, if I was going through this exercise linear and trying to arrive at an Ikigai, okay, love to help is one from Ingrid. What else? So you say, I love to help people. Tobias says, build people, right? Seeing a light bulb go on in someone's mind. Natural health. Okay. Painting, love that. Okay. Bringing value. Photography, seeing people thrive, meeting people of different cultures and walks of life that are not necessarily exactly like me, being a force for good. Okay. So hopefully you're all seeing the chat, right? You can see these answers, connecting with people, having people see their potential. Love that one. Love, love, love that one. Making a difference. How about songwriting? Thank you very much. I love songwriting. That's beautiful. Jack, thank you for serving. You are a great servant. Okay, I love to grow living things. Kim and Eric. My wife loves to garden. Isn't that an interesting love? Okay. Now, I love making people laugh. Love fly fishing. Chris Dominguez, I love fly fishing too. Let's go fishing. Okay, next question, right? Keeping that in mind, and notice the intersection between this. These are kissing cousins. What are you good at? You might love writing songs, but not be great at it. I'm not saying you aren't, but you know what I mean? Like, let's talk now about what are you good at? How many of the things you're good at happen to also be the things you love? There's kind of an interesting relationship. So now answer the question, I am good at, and then put something in. I'm good at motivating people. I'm good at teaching and educating and encouraging others. Finding laughter in a situation. Wow, that's a great thing to be good at. I'm good, John Bash, communicating a message. Yes, you are, John. You're a master at that. Okay. I'm good at forming relationships. I'm good at organizing things. And Masami, I'm good at being positive. Yes, you are. You are a force for positivity in the world. So it's so cool for me as I listen to these. I'm good at teaching. I'm good at quilting, right? Cooking healthy foods. Yes, you are, Marie. I love that. Okay. Now, are you guys seeing all this in the chat, right? These beautiful things that you love and what you can be good at. And notice that how many of these things are naturally linked to building an ASEA business. Some of them, right, are just building families, building relationships. Kim says, I'm a great mom and grandma. Yeah, that's awesome, right? Super inspiring to see these. Sharing Pearlisms from a caring place. Thank you, Pearl. Beautiful. So here's my next question, guys. And this is a little bit trickier, right? Now I'm asking you, of the things you've listed that you love and the things you've listed that you're good at, let's talk about, can you be rewarded for those? Is it possible to be rewarded, Samuel, for being a good listener? That's a really interesting question, right? Is it possible to be rewarded for helping others with a lifestyle that's healthy? So there's ways to think about this and saying, okay, yeah, and that's a good question, right? Cisco, what kind of reward do we mean? Is the compensation just money? Yeah, Sylvie says, no, it's not always just money, right? It's a smile or a thank you. Couldn't agree more. I do believe that in the Japanese sense, the concept of what you can be rewarded for does point to your ability to survive, right? To be sustained. And I think that's an interesting question for all of us to consider. Now, throw in the chat for me, if you will. What does the world need? This is a really interesting one. And now I want to challenge you guys. You can say peace, love, and understanding, and I agree with that, right? But what does the world need that possibly intersects with what you love, what you're good at, and what you could be rewarded for? I want to read some of these to you, and you guys can see these too, right? How to be healthier. Boy, is that true, right? They need leadership. There's a lack of leadership, things that can be trusted. Cisco, people listening. I agree, right? Happiness, to be a little bit better at loving themselves. confidence that they matter. Risa, thank you. I love that one. I totally agree. There is a need for increased confidence that they know that people know they matter, right? And I find that so much. Let me just scroll. I'm scrolling now through the chat. Do you think, here's my question, and I'm not trying to steer this just to ASEA. I don't think IKIGAI is just an ASEA concept. Of course I don't. But I'm so grateful to be part of an organization where I believe we can sponsor an IKIGAI experience. I believe that we can encourage people to get engaged, do what they love, something they can be good at. And by the way, I'm not just saying sharing the opportunity, sharing the product. I'm talking about they can share their ability to listen. They can share their honest character. They can share being a great mom and grandmother at ASEA, right? It's a beautiful concept to think about. And here's the next question. Can we be rewarded for our work inside of ASEA? And I think we all know the answer to that. Yes, and not just in money, right? I've loved what Cindy Buck taught me early on, that you can be paid in goosebumps, right? And we can be rewarded by helping other people. And then the question of what the world needs. And that's kind of where I want to finish some of my remarks, trying to be sensitive to time. I think we scheduled this for an hour. Let me just say that I think we all would do well to give some thought to this ikigai. And ikigai, by the way, should be a verb. If it's your reason for being, then maybe put the word to in front of it. And, whether that's to believe, belong, and become, that's my ikigai. To listen with empathy and compassion. You remember from our Envision at the United States, where I challenged your 6-word leadership legacies, and some of the beautiful language that came from that really starts to point at this notion of ikigai, this beautiful Japanese kind of concept or philosophy about reason for being. Now, let me stop the share and I'll finish just with a few thoughts here. Okay. So the training I wanted to share today is, number one, I'm a pattern mapper. I love to see you are here maps where I can go, oh my gosh, that makes a lot of sense to me. I love the idea of inviting us to reflect, to step back and consider, what is it that I truly love? What is it that I can be really good at? And can I be paid for that? Can I earn a commensurate reward, be compensated for that? And is this something the world needs? I think that you could approach this Japanese philosophy, and I'll remind you, from Okinawa, where the longest life expectancy in the world is where this comes from. And it does beg the question, is there a correlation to ikigai and longevity? To not necessarily chasing consumerism and getting wrapped around the axle of what the world tells us is this ritual of consume and burn rates and continuing to turn over product and burning through disposable income and acting like there's some sort of ikigai fulfillment in that, or deciding, you know what, there's more. And I want to try to find that in my life. And I think the comment someone made in the chat, which was, do I need to wait for retirement to do what I love and what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about and hope it makes a little bit of money and does some good in the world? Or can I really engage in ikigai now? There's a gentleman online, Tim Tamashita, I think is his name, who is a Canadian person and really kind of an interesting influencer around this concept of ikigai. If you go watch some of his talks, there's a TED talk or two on this and others, he'll talk about starting part-time. How do you find ikigai? And he says, start part-time. And I think it's interesting, how many people inside of ASEA start part-time? And, as they engage in this quest for what is my true ikigai, in his case, his was just 2 words, to delight. That's my whole reason for being, to delight. I want to delight other people in anything that I do. I thought it was beautifully simple. And I think it's beautiful to spend time thinking about this concept of ikigai and then practicing it a little bit. I'm grateful that we're part of a company and part of a movement that I believe does in fact meet the world at a need. That there is a need for our product, and I believe there's a need for our form of cultural leadership in this world. And I believe we owe it to the world and to ourselves to be more committed to how we engage in the world, not just the results that we get, but how we get the results, to seeing ourselves inside the social construct of something bigger than just ourselves, and to being part of that conversation and part of that dialogue in the way that we share what we share. There is irony. There's great irony that this industry is indictable and maligned so often for being way off ikigai and dropping just into the rewards. And as you've listened to my Envision message on next level marketing, I hope that you'll take that seriously. I do think we need to be sensitive to the principles that underscore our business and trying our best to truly distribute worldwide, not just our product and not just the opportunity, but most certainly our culture as well. I believe we're teaching principles and truths in a very real and transparent way in hopes that it will inspire and help others. I have a friend in Europe. Her name is Birgitta. And Birgitta was a foster parent to more than one child, to several children. I met her in Europe some years ago, and I remember meeting her for the first time and could feel and sense almost a shyness about her. I was so impressed with what she did in her life, and I wanted to remind her that she made a difference in the world. And I've loved watching her journey of ikigai inside of ASEA. She is really starting to, I believe, reach out to her own ikigai and live her full purpose and reason for being. And I don't know if she'll ever hear this, but I've been inspired by the things she shared with me. Here was a woman that has given her life to raise foster children, but who was questioning whether or not she could do ASEA. And I was so amazed and was so humbled and wanted to remind her that here, what you've done in your life will change the life of these children. And it's so powerful that we need to remember, we need to look for the ikigai that we see in other people. We need to call it out. We need to help them to see it. We need to awaken that it's possible to live a life of ikigai. It's possible to find a place where I'm doing what I love, I'm doing something I'm good at and getting better at. I'm paid well for it or rewarded for it properly, and it has a social impact in the world. And I do believe that we have an opportunity and a responsibility to try to live this out in the world, and especially in ASEA. And I was so touched by this. Some of you that have read Good to Great by Jim Collins might see some parallels between Ikigai and what he refers to as the hedgehog concept. The hedgehog concept is what drives your economic engine, intersecting with what you can be best in the world at and what you're passionate about. These are pretty similar concepts, but I thought the Japanese approach to it was so beautiful by how clearly it called out the need inside of community. I feel like that's something we need to continue to elevate in what we do. We build and garden communities. That's what ASEA is. It's a garden of communities that be building into teams where we see the Ikigai in others and help to nurture that and bring it out. And so guys, I hope this helps today. We've got a few minutes left, and maybe what we could do is just have a little volley through the chat on any questions that I might be able to answer or just insights you might want to have. but open to any comments or questions through the chat for just a few minutes before we wrap up. Anything you guys would like me to riff on for a few minutes? Guys, we wish so desperately that we could be with you. We were certain that we were going to go to Croatia and Rome and to Bali this year. We were absolutely certain that we were going to be with you. Here we are. Can you believe it? Next week is May. And it's so humbling to me to think how quickly time flies. But the fact is, we have not been able to be with you. I want to invite and challenge all of you to, whether you're in the United States or not, to be prepared to participate with us virtually or physically in Nashville. We're really working on a set of deliverables that are really aimed at enhancing your business and really trying to take us forward in a way in Nashville I think you don't want to miss. So I want to invite all of you to join us in Nashville for our event, again, whether physically if you can or virtually. And we really appreciate what you guys do for the company. And we really feel very fortunate that you're part of our IKIGAI. I will tell you this. I sat last night late staring at this framework, and I'll throw it up one more time so you can see it. And I sat staring at this IKIGAI concept, and I said to myself, you know, I feel so thankful. I can genuinely and honestly say that I live my IKIGAI here. I never would have known how to get to this place if it wasn't for my dad's vision, the risks that he took, and just the invitation he made to me to come with him. I owe him so much for that. But I truly feel like I live my own IKIGAI here at ASEA. I get to share truth and principles that I think the world needs. I get to share, build, and offer products that I believe the world needs. I do love it. It's something I'm very grateful for. I feel both passion and mission for it. I like to hope I'm good enough at it to have some influence in that world. And I'm grateful for what it rewards me. And by that, I mean, probably least of all, the money. I do believe that worth and prosperity are measured in far more than money. And that's truly the case. My worth and prosperity comes from relationships with all of you. And I feel so thankful to be part of something that has this natural IKIGAI to it. And I want to challenge all of you to consider your IKIGAI. Let us not forget what it is that we're about, and let's increase our willingness to go out to the world and share this. So I say to all of you, happy IKIGAI as we close the call today, and wish you all the very best as you continue to grow your ASEA business. Chris and Veronica, I'm a few minutes early, but we'll wrap things up right here. Hopefully you'll share this video with others in your teams that maybe didn't qualify for Ascent. And we look forward to seeing you guys in Nashville. So thanks a lot. Take care.